Ever feel like your Dom-Sub dynamic could be deeper and more meaningful? You're not alone. Service in BDSM is often misunderstood as simple obedience, but it's so much more than that. I'm Alessandra from Dom-Sub Living, and today I'll show you what a service-oriented dynamic is and how it can elevate your relationship to a whole new level without it feeling robotic or forced. Ready to unlock your true power of service in your relationship? Welcome to the Dom-Sub Living podcast. Before we get into all of the details of service-oriented dynamics, definitely grab my free list of 20 different protocols at domsubliving.com/protocols. That way you can see real-life examples to help inspire your dynamic. And again, you can grab that for free at domsubliving.com/protocols. So today we're exploring the world of service-oriented dynamics and how small, intentional acts can transform your relationship. So you're going to learn how to add meaning to your service, how to avoid the common pitfalls and mistakes that I see, how to build a stronger connection through intentional service, and I'll even give you some ideas to get started and share what I personally do in my dynamic. But first, let's dive into what service-oriented BDSM actually means and how it can enrich your relationship in unexpected ways. So what do we even mean when we say something is a service-oriented dynamic or service-oriented BDSM? Well, it's really when you're focusing on acts that show dedication, respect, and love because you are serving, but you're not just doing it robotically or just doing mindless obedience because you're having a purpose and you're having intention. So it's about giving and serving in a way that really strengthens your bond. And for me personally, early on in my journey, I really thought that service meant just simply following instructions or just checking all the boxes of all the tasks I needed to do. But I really quickly realized that service was more about giving and serving. And I started to bring more meaning into it. And it just really became, my submission became more of a gift rather than an obligation. Because be honest, have you ever done something for your partner only to feel it was just a task rather than a meaningful gesture? Like, be honest, do you just sometimes go through the motions? I mean, that's something that we have all been guilty of at one time or another. But when we shift our perspective, service can really become an act of choice that can be fulfilling for both the Dom and the sub. So now that we know what service-oriented BDSM is, what are some common misunderstandings about service dynamics? So the first misconception I really see is that people equate service with being subservient. So some people think that to serve, it really means to put yourself in a lesser position. But in reality, service isn't just this hierarchy thing. It's about choosing to give, choosing to care for someone else, and to show that other person respect. And it kind of reminds me of that saying, how there's more happiness in giving than there is in receiving. Because, for example, if you take something simple like making coffee for your partner in the morning, it's just such a small act. So if a simple act like that can make you and your partner's day better, that doesn't make you lesser. It makes your relationship even stronger. And then the other misconception that I hear, and this is probably the most popular one, that service feels robotic or boring even. And so a lot of times I will say, well, if you're dynamic and if your service feels boring, then maybe you're the boring one. Because if it's becoming dull or repetitive, then maybe it's because you're not doing it with intention and making it a ritual and bringing some meaning into your routine. And so again, taking that example of serving my Dom coffee, that can be something that could be so boring. But when I bring intention into it, where I'm bringing all my senses into it. I'm smelling the coffee before I scoop it in. I'm feeling the warmth of the mug while I'm holding it to serve it to him. All these things. I'm practicing my posture. I'm practicing with my head tilted a certain way, what I'm going to say, it every single time I do it, I try to bring that beginner's mind, so it's almost like the first time I do it, and that way it creates more meaning. Because have you ever noticed how the energy can really change when you're fully present in what you're doing? And service is no different than that. BDSM is no different in that when we're doing something intentional, it really brings this new energy into the dynamic. But now that we debunked some of those misconceptions or myths about service, let's talk about the power of intention and mindfulness in these types of dynamics. So, we touched on it a little bit, but what do we really mean when we're talking about being mindful? So, mindfulness is really about being present and fully aware while you're performing these acts of service. So here's just a practical example. So imagine you're folding your partner's clothes. So that can be considered one of the most boringest tasks, doing laundry. But instead of rushing through it, taking a moment to think about how this will make your partner's day easier, how setting their clothes in a certain way, how that is a way for caring for them. So that is just a way you can stay mindful. Another example for me personally is even something as small as cleaning our toys. That really just becomes a act of service when I'm fully present and thinking about all the things that these toys have done and seen and will be doing in the future. I'm not just doing this out of routine, I'm really doing this with care, knowing that these are the tools for my dominant. And this is an act of service to show my appreciation. And if you're still not understanding like how to do something more mindfully, one of the biggest tips is just to do it more slowly. Because when you do something slowly, doesn't it feel more meaningful and more intentional when you're doing that? You notice little things, you start thinking about different things instead of just going through the motions. So, this approach really deepens your appreciation, and you can even create a ritual around it to strengthen the bond of both you and your partner. So, just a little hack for dominance when you're assigning your submissive a task, one thing you can add is to tell them to do it slowly, even giving them a time to do it. So, a task that they may usually rush through, tell them to really do it as slowly as they can and to notice all of their senses when they're doing it. But now that you know how to be intentional and mindful, let's go over some other real life examples of service oriented practices that you can incorporate into your dynamic. So, the first real service oriented ritual you can have is just a daily ritual for connection. So, this would be like a small daily act of service, and it can be a powerful way to show your appreciation. So, one of my favorite rituals is just kind of leaving a snack or packing a meal for my dominant and leaving him a note. And because it's something he doesn't really expect, but I know that will make his day smoother. It'll bring a smile to his face. And it's just a way of saying, I see you, I appreciate you, and I care for you. So, really think about one thing you could do that would make your partner feel cherished and cared for and served. And then the second service task you kind of want to incorporate into your dynamic is self care. Self care can be service too, because caring for yourself can be an act of serving your dominant because it allows you to show up as your best self in your relationship. So it's such an important reminder to take time for ourselves. And I know this is easier said than done. I totally get it. I'm a mom to two kids and I have health issues on top of it. But whether it's a few minutes of quiet time or just sticking to a wellness routine, it really ensures that I can give from a place of strength and not exhaustion. So really isn't the best gift we can give our partner a healthier and happier version of ourselves. And then the third way you can incorporate service into your dynamic is to create space for connection. So, one way you can do this is to set up a space or the environment so that you can have a scene with your partner. So, making sure, like I said, that the toys are clean, that everything is available and laid out. You can shop for candles, you can pick a playlist and make sure that's all set up so that everything is easy for the dominant as possible. Because a lot of times, so much pressure is put on the dominant to create these elaborate scenes, but having a hand in the scene in a service oriented way where you know that you had a hand in it, that you are a part of it, it can just make it so much more meaningful. And because you're putting that care and that intention into that, even asking your dominant, what can I do so that way we can have a scene this weekend? Is there anything that I can help prepare for you or help get ready? Even shopping for the clothes that you will be wearing, and giving it to your dominant for approval and letting them pick is a way you can serve them better. But now that you have some ideas to get you started, let me give you my best tips for creating a service oriented dynamic. So, tip number one is to start small and focus on intention. So, it's really about the quality of your service and not quantity. So, if you're new to this, definitely start small with a small daily act. So, maybe think of a way to make their morning routine smoother, and just kind of prepare something they need. So, whether that is clothes or a meal or coffee, even, or just even a morning text to help brighten their day. So, really think about what is one small gesture that can make your partner's day easier and also show that you care about them. And then my second tip is to communicate openly about service preferences. So you can ask each other about meaningful acts of service and not just assume what your partner thinks is meaningful service. So really open up that conversation. Because I know in my relationship, I found that asking my Dom outright, like what acts of service made the biggest difference and helped him to feel more appreciated and connected, really went a long way. And then I wasn't having to guess or just come up with things. I knew exactly what he was looking for in our dynamic. So definitely don't assume what your partner wants. You need to ask them. And then my third tip is to establish rituals and routines as acts of service. So, routines can really help anchor your dynamic. So, setting a weekly or daily ritual, something like a coffee break or preparing for the evening together, it can really strengthen the relationship. You can even have a service protocol around bathing where you help your partner even do something like shaving. That is a huge service oriented task that you can do for your partner too. But just really think about what's one routine you could create that would just instantly bring you both closer together. But before we go farther into this and I give you some more examples, I just want to address a common objection that you may be thinking while you're listening to this. And I hear a lot of people when they hear about service oriented dynamics, they think, especially if there's the submissive, they say that they're worried about losing their independence, that they're just going to become this robot and serve their dominant in a robotic way. And I get it. Service might feel like you're losing yourself, that you're losing your independence, but really just remembering that service is actually a choice and it's an expression of strength, that you are choosing to do this, that you don't have to do this, but because you are such a strong and giving and caring person that you are choosing to express yourself in this way. Because really, isn't true independence about having the power to choose what you give and when you give it and who you give it to, rather than feeling obligated? And when it's done right, service enriches both partners, both the dominant and the submissive. So for the submissive partner, service really provides structure and focus and a sense of purpose in the dynamic. I know for me, it can be extremely grounding to have these acts of service. And it really just reminds me of my commitment to my dominant and to the relationship and to myself. And for the dominant partner, service helps the dominant feel appreciative and supported so that they can become the best dom they can be. And I know in my dynamic, I can see how service builds kind of this cycle of gratitude between us. When my dom feels supported, they're more engaged and attentive to me, so it comes full circle. So imagine the energy in your relationship if both parties feel valued and respected and seen. I mean, wouldn't that create something truly lasting and just keep giving back to each other? But just to recap, mindfulness, small intentional acts, and open communication are so valuable in service oriented dynamics. So, I encourage you to start with one simple act of service for your partner this week, something intentional and thoughtful. And if you need even more ideas, definitely grab my free list of 20 different protocols at domsubliving.com/protocols. That way you can see even more real life examples to help inspire you in your dynamic. And again, you can download that for free at domsubliving.com/protocols. But I just want to say, for me, service has become one of the most meaningful parts of my dynamic. And it's more than just actions, it's the way we stay connected, grounded, and committed to each other. So, if this episode inspired you to explore service oriented dynamics, please subscribe and share your experience in the comments. So, what is one small act of service you will try this week? Let's keep the conversation going. And until next time, keep embracing your power and pleasure through Dom Subliving.